morning, marvelous afternoon, and amazing evening. Thank you, Carla and Riechman, for getting us started on these wonderful, I can't.
Introductions
for MindPlore with Carla and Friends. I like using these words, but I never know what's coming out of my mouth until it comes out. And sometimes I forget what's coming out. So that's me. And I'm allowed to be crazy because I am the host of the show. So I can say whatever I want, whenever I want, and however I want. And luckily, everyone's smiling and agreeing with me. So I'm very happy. Today, we are talking about bringing positivity into 2022. We've had some rough years recently, but it's time to turn it around and begin smiling and begin thinking positively, because the world happens as we see it in our mind. And if we want a nice world, we need to be thinking that way. And with that, I'm handing it over to Jeanne because she knows that I have something I need to do. So Jeanne, go to it and I will do what I need to do. Thank you.
As they say, teamwork makes the dream work. I wanted to start off the quotes with something from Vincent van Gogh, which tells us how to set up our mind for spreading positivity. And he said, if you hear a voice within you say you cannot paint, then by all means paint, and that voice will be silenced. It's a great way of starting out thinking about how we can set ourselves up for spreading positivity. And then the author, Harvey Mackay, writes, positive thinking is more than just a tagline. It changes the way we behave. And I firmly believe that when I am positive, it not only makes me better, but it also makes those around me better. And Les Brown, the motivational speaker, wrote, in every day, there are 1,440 minutes. That means we have 1,440 daily opportunities to make a positive impact. And little bonus, I saw something by the great philosopher Anonymous, who said, there are two ways to spread the light. You can be the candle, or you can be the mirror reflecting the candle. And that's what I thought of was really great. So we start with changing our mindset, as Vincent van Gogh says, and then we realize that we can spread that positivity and we can reflect others' positivity. Knut, you're kind of gesturing there. What is that? How does that sit with you?
Well, I love it, and I have had this as a life rule, that we need to think positively first, because when we think positively, we create the energy necessary to implement and to manifest the positive thinking. And sometimes we also need to listen into the positive feelings, even if we can start out the day with a bad feeling, but we can both change our energy and our emotional state of mind, and we can change the way we think. And when those two comes together, when they come together, then we have the necessary power to do good. And for me, that is extremely important. It's not only enough to think positively, but we need to disseminate and to get it out, to spread that positive thinking. And I think that is more necessary than ever in these days and in this pandemic. We really need to understand that, yes, it starts with positive thinking. The next step is to do what we have intended to do.
That's true. Action is critical in everything that we do. And I like the idea of starting with working on your mind, because I don't think it's natural for us to start positively. I think it's natural for us to start critically. And that often takes us down a rabbit hole. And I like that Van Gogh says, if you hear that voice inside your head that says you can't do something, go ahead and do it. Because we have that capability to, I want to say oversee, but really to edit that voice in our head to be positive. And, you know, I remember one time somebody was talking about, you know, a shakeup in the stock market, and they were really crazy. And I was like, okay, that's a moment in time. We need to flip that. And, you know, instead of freaking out because the news is freaking out, go, okay, this is part of the cycle of life. Let's move on to how to make it better. Victor, how does that fit with you?
How to make it better? I think
How
everybody
to flip?
has it.
Hmm?
Oh yes, flipping is another way of saying reframing. And one of the things that I say all the time is that I'm better than I was and not as good as I'm going to be. That reflects a person's worldview. Because see, your worldview is going to determine the course of your life. If you see the world as a circus ride and you know just riding up and down and you're going wee, everything that happens, you know, it's an experience. It's an experience that you like or an experience that you like a lot. Or you can see the world as a competition, which means that everything that goes on, you have to try to be better. You have to make sure and measure yourself against everybody else. Or you can see the world as a movie of which you are the star. So your worldview is going to determine how well you get to be better than you were and not as good as you are. So flipping the script or reframing is something that you must take seriously if you want to spread positivity. And the thing about it, Jeanne, no one's going to do it for you. No one's going to remind you to think positive. That's going to have to be up to you. In fact, if you want to consider, if you want the world to be positive, if you want to spread more positivity, you've got to take it on yourself to spread positivity to others. Now, for me, that sometimes can be a bit tricky because there is this thing called being argumentative. And when a person relates something to me that's not positive, in the past, it was my habit to negate what they're saying and give them something else. Well, I've changed that now so that when someone says something to me that's not positive, only in my mind do I make a change. Because when people say things to you that are not positive, that are affecting them negatively, they're not trying to be negative. They're doing the best that they can. And the only way that you're going to improve their lot, the only way that you're going to be able to impart something to them is if they think that you have their best interest at heart. And if you're not listening to what they say, if you're negating what they say, if you're telling them, oh, that's just not true, then you're not going to win any fans. You're not going to win any converts when it comes to improving someone's outlook on life, improving their ability to generate positivity.
I think that's a really important point. The power of listening is beyond just hearing the words. It's actually understanding where somebody's coming from. And that tends to be the part of listening that we forget. Because most of us, I think it was Stephen Covey who said, we listen to reply, we don't listen to hear the other person. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, because he was much better at that. But it's true. It's our human nature when somebody's speaking to start thinking about what you're going to say, because you want to prove that you're just as smart as them or that you have more. And so we react versus thoughtfully acting. And when you can truly actively listen, you can hear. Sometimes when people aren't all that positive, they're hurt and they want somebody to notice. And all we have to do is be there. We don't have to say anything. We just need to, let them know we're there to support them. And that actually can spread positivity. And that might be why I like that anonymous quote about you can be the candlelight or you could be the mirror reflecting the candlelight. Sometimes we just need to be present.
Just don't be darkness. Just don't be darkness. In that analogy you're giving, be the candle or the mirror that reflects the candle, just don't choose to be darkness.
Knut, I see you imperceptibly nodding your head.
I've been working with this listening concept, listening. What is really deep listening? Because to listen, to hear something, that can be a reaction. I hear something and I react. But to listen is to go beyond what is hidden, what is to listen into the meta communication, what is hidden behind, what is beyond what is said or acted out. And I think this is why, it's also about experiencing and to have positive experiences. It's not easy to tell people that you have to think positively, because you have to, otherwise it will end up, in some misery. You need to feel it. You need to really to implement it and integrate it. And that's why, I'm also a pedagogue, so we learn, this learning by doing. I think that is also true here, because when we learn that, it also gives rewards. As human beings, we need rewards, we need strokes, we need to see, realize and to experience that, yes, by doing good, I'm not just doing good for myself, I'm doing good for the whole. And if I spread some positive thoughts and I spread positive thinking, and I, as I said, without a vision, people perish. I truly believe in that. Without hope, without anything to really hope for, then we can talk about a lot of positive things. But still, many people, they feel lonely because they are told by therapists and whoever, we tell each other, yeah, but you have to put yourself together, put yourself together. It will pass, with the time you will get to this. I say no. And Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher, he also said, if you really wanted to help a person, then you can't start from another point that besides him or her. You start there. So listening is to find out, what do you really want? What do you really want? To listen behind. Because if I ask you, how is your day today? It's, this is fine. It's a social code. But it's just a social code and it's positive, yes. But sometimes we need to share what is not so good. And that is also positive thinking. Because yes, I hear you. I listen to you. I do understand what you feel. And then the other feels seen and understood. And that is for me both the positive listening, the positive and the positive acting in a given situation.
That's true. And I think that one of the steps that we often miss is how to process what we're feeling, or and how to help others process. I remember I heard this a lot when I was growing up. If I got teary-eyed for some reason, I would hear, buck up, you need to be stronger. For whatever reason, you skin your knee, buck up, you can do this. Or if you were hurt by something somebody said, buck up, you can handle this, you're too sensitive. And that in the time was probably appropriate for a parent to say, or for an older sibling to say, because you needed to learn to survive. But as an adult, I look back and I go, it would have been nicer if they said, oh, I'm so sorry. I know that hurt. Let's go get, an ice cream, something like that, to just say, okay, now we're going to transition from being hurt to being okay. But there's a processing part in that. And so part of what we might need to do as we spread positivity is to be critically aware of how we need to listen. And in active listening, you summarize back what you've heard, so people know that you've been heard. I think one of the lines I love the best in Avatar is, I see you, I hear you. So my doorbell just went, so I'm going to kick this over to Victor and I'll be right back.
You got a barking dog as a doorbell? How cool. That is really, really cool that you have a barking dog as a doorbell.
Acting.
Remember the 2 minutes, guys.
Well, there's only two of us, so we don't mind. So anyway, the idea of positivity is endemic to who I am, and it's endemic to anybody who spends a lot of time with me because I'm really into positivity. Now, what's different for me is I very seldom use the word positivity. There are people in my life that say, well, as long as you're doing something positive, then it's okay. And I've heard that statement before, but I never really uttered the word positivity. I just kind of exude positivity. And the reason that I'm able to do that is that when I am alone, I am thinking of ways to be positive. I find that the person that you are in public, the person that people see you as, is the person that you are when you are alone. And when you are alone, if you are having thoughts of loss, thoughts of depression, thoughts of not winning, if you're having those sort of thoughts permeate your mind on a continuous basis, then that's what's going to come out when you're not alone. Now, the time that we are on a broadcast right now, and we're all speaking and talking and interacting, and we're all being very professional and very profound in our thoughts. I find that in the social media where we are, there are people that post profound statements all the time. And it's odd to me that those same people who post those profound statements, as I view their social media profile sometimes, I hear other things coming out of their mouth, and it's like, well, wait a minute. I thought you said how you feel about me was none of my business. I thought that's what you said. Well, if that's what you said, why is your feelings hurt? Because somebody said this about you, because if it's none of your business. So you get the idea. You say these positive things, you write these positive quotes, but then afterwards you seem to forget that you wrote them. You seem to forget that they exist. So my suggestion for 2022 is to actually take to heart the things that you're posting. Take to heart the things that you listen to. You see view attitudes on the wall behind me. And view attitudes is a word I made up basically saying that if you change your view, you could change your attitude. So change your view into one of life being for you. The only reason that life exists is for you. And whatever you get from it, it's going to be for you. And then help others develop that same mindset, that same worldview. Because even the people that we were briefly discussing who are having a tough time, who are experiencing hurt, the unfortunate truth is that most of the hurt that we experience, it's made up based on how we look at things. And we could change our view and look at things in a different way.
Mm.
That's true.
Mm.
There are two things that come to mind when you're talking about that. One is I have been told that sometimes I have a Pollyannish attitude.
Live with it. Yeah,
and I
live with
say,
that.
thanks. And I know it's meant as a criticism that I'm only looking at maybe superficial things or something, but that's not true. That's somebody making a judgment about me and they don't know me very well. There's one thing that I can tell you. It's in the midst of a crisis, I will be the diplomatic one, and I will look for the positive parts because that's how we get through it. But I have heard that, and I would prefer to live in a world of Pollyannas. Very intelligent Pollyannas at that, that can work through the things the things we need to work through. And in other words, those ups and downs, figuring out how to ride this thing called life. So when we're up, we're really happy and we're moving through. And when we're a little on the downside, we know how to come out of it. Or as to use a word Knut said earlier was integrating. We have to integrate. There is darkness and light in our life. We have to integrate it and know that actually the darkness that we have individually, those difficult feelings that you mentioned earlier, Victor, they're part of our makeup. And if we integrate that and we learn how to process it, then we can move forward to have more of the light and the positive exude out of us. Because if we don't if we don't integrate the darkness, we have a two-dimensional life. You know, when you're drawing a picture and you put a circle down, it's just a circle. But when you start to shade in and add the darkness around the edges, it becomes a sphere. And that's how we add the 3D, you know. So we need to be mature enough to accept and move through those difficult moments, to listen to others as they go through their difficult moments, to support them, and to grow the foundation of positivity from the ground up.
Isn't that then also to share? I think when we talk about now, you know, positive thinking, we often end up with the thinking. I'm not sure about that. I totally agree with you, Victor. I've worked a lot with this, you know, the worldview. We need to often to change, yes, the worldview, but not the least what you mentioned now, Jade, because when we look at the reality as a duality, you know, two opposing forces, the positive and the negative, the evil and the good, then we miss a dimension of sharing. Because as you say, we live both with the shadow and the light. And if we really listen, then we don't judge. It is not positive or negative. We leave that way of thinking at all. We just listen. And then the next coming up for me is that sharing is also then to create, is creating. Then we come into each other's space, both with the light and the shadow. And then we look at it, you know, from two or different perspectives. And then we start to create together. And that is a true relationship. We create something together that is better for both or all parties than we started with. That is what Einstein says too. You can't solve the problem with the same thinking as created it in the beginning. So when we leave the thinking, because the positive thinking is also a part of the social codes. What is positive thinking? That can be what the environment is expecting from us to think and to do. And if we break out of it, then we are looked at as, you know, nerds, or, you know, we are outsiders, or we are crazy people because we don't live the way that other people expect from us. I said, no, this is not positive thinking. This is just reacting from some values that are expected to be the right thing to do or to think or to feel even, you know? So when we leave that, then we go into a new worldview, and that is this sharing of whatever is coming up, shadow or light. And then from there, we start to explore each other, explore the topic or the issue we are approaching. And then I've seen it so many times. It's extraordinary. It's amazing to see what comes up from this leaving the dual thinking.
I see Victor's getting ready to say something.
I sometimes wonder about this duality. Here's what I know. I don't make allowances for evil. I don't make allowances for bad. I don't prepare for them. I see the life experience as a result of the stuff that I'm thinking. In fact, there's some teachers who believe that the world as we live in it is a collective interpretation of the thoughts of the people that are on the planet. And when the people when you have millions and millions of people that's developing a certain mindset, or millions and millions of people that's feeling victimized, then you're going to get physical representations of something that justifies it. Now, just before this thing that I tend not to give any life to came into our world about 2 years ago, the world as a whole, excuse me, had this idea about how horrible it was. And you remember, particularly in America, they had this idea about how terrible things were going to be. Their outlook was not positive. Their outlook was negative. And sure enough, look what has happened. So in my view, the world we live in is because of the thoughts that we have. It is my desire to help others get tuned into the fact that what you think about, you bring about. So you don't really need to think about how bad it was. You don't really need to think about what you got to do to get over this. You don't really need to think about any of that. You just need to think about the things you want. And keep your mind on the things you want and off the things that you don't.
Go ahead.
I point out that nobody ever plants weeds. If you're into gardening, you know nobody ever plants weeds. But if you want to have a phenomenal garden, you've got to take it upon yourself to pull those weeds out because they are going to show up. Conversely, you don't need to make any accounts for what's evil or what's bad. You don't need to even think about it because it's going to show up. Just purpose in your heart that however it shows up, you're going to win. You're going to get the caveat of whatever it has in it because it always has something.
Yeah, it's a concept I think of as cognitive dissonance. If we make a decision, we change all of the thoughts and all of our perceptions around to make that a decision good for us. So if you bought a new car, for example, and it's, say it's a Prius, you're going to think about and expand about all the good things that this Prius has versus all the other cars you could have chosen to make you feel good about that decision. But we do it with what's happening in the world. So we started talking about, I brought up, when the stock market crashes, everybody's like, ah, and I tend to think, well, okay, it's been a bad day. Tomorrow will be a better day, because if we all react, as you said, if we all react with that fear, that reproduces out in the world. We need to change that. And that's to me, that's part of spreading positivity. It's looking at what's the situation and do we need to panic or manage or even take it further than manage and take over. Sometimes when you're in a situation that's relatively negative, you turn into the clown and get everybody laughing, so that we can handle it. We all have different ways of handling issues, but if we always handle them with fear and trepidation, we're not getting through much and we're not learning. And I like to learn and say, okay, that's a lesson. What did I learn from it? And that's what I say to the kids. You just went through this. What was the lesson you learned? Now, are you going to ever do that again? And usually the answer is no, because they've learned something. And as adults, we have to learn to learn. Carla, you're back.
Well, it was kind of crazy getting it out today. So I agree. But I've been watching a lot of Abraham Hicks, and we hold ourselves back because we're concerned about what happened a minute ago instead of just accepting the moment for what it is. And I think we need to learn that the moment is there for a reason, but it's in the past. You can't do anything about what happened in the past. We can only carry what we learned into the future. And I think we get so stuck in the past that we forget that we only have this very moment. And that's my thought on this whole thing. I mean, if you keep thinking about what happened 2 minutes ago, maybe I got mad at Victor for saying something. So what? It's already said. We can only move forward. And part of moving forward is accepting the past for what it is and not regretting it. And it also means maybe I am waiting for Jeanne to say a certain thing and she says something the opposite. Worrying about what she may say next isn't going to do me much good either, because we only have this present moment and we can only live in the moment. My 2 cents for what it's worth.
It's true.
Just imagine, if you will, that you're in the middle and around you is a conveyor belt. And there are these big pots going around you in the conveyor belt. These pots have a variety of different thoughts in them, right? And you just stand in the middle of it, and this happens all the time. And each moment, each second, you look into one of those pots and you pick one of the thoughts out and you keep it, right? And then you throw it away someplace. And in the next moment, the conveyor belt is still moving around you. That's how I believe we manage our life. And we manage it by the thoughts that we choose. Because you can pick any one that you want to. You could pick the uninteresting thought. You can pick the thought that doesn't make you feel good. You could pick the thought that makes you feel good, but it's up to you. You can do it. The only thing that's missing, in my view, is the knowledge that you have that power. And that's why I spend much of my time sharing with people that they do have that power. When I say I'm better than I was and not as good as I'm going to be, I want someone to, well, what do you mean by that? I want someone to have a conversation with me, because I want to tell them, not only am I better than I was and not as good as I'm going to be, but you as well are better than you were and not as good as you're going to be. And that inherently helps people choose more useful thoughts as they're in the middle of that conveyor belt.
Interesting. Yeah, it's there was a discussion I had a long time ago. Somebody actually said, at any time in the world, there's only 12 ideas out there, and it's up to us to reach up and grab them and take them out of the ether. And I thought about that for a while, and then I was like, well, that might explain why, we have inventors who come up with things that are very similar. Because once you start with a thought, then you bring your experience into it. And, if we all said, okay, the cliches, the mousetrap, we all want a different mousetrap, but we all look at it different. So taking that, extrapolating that to what you just said, there's a conveyor belt with all these ideas and thoughts, and we get to pick and choose. That's very powerful. You get to pick and choose what thoughts you pay attention to. And I've often thought that when they say we only use 10% of our brain, which I know scientifically they're changing that, but the common wisdom is we only use 10% of our brain. And my thought is that's the 10% we're aware of. Those are the thoughts we know about, because there's 180,000 million gazillion thoughts that go through our mind that we're not aware of. And when you know that, then you know to pay attention. So when you have a negative thought about yourself, you know that you're paying attention to it, and you need to go, okay, let's realign those thoughts. That might have been something I needed to think about to save myself when I was 5 years old, but now I'm not 5 and I'm an adult and I can look at things differently. So instead of saying, who do you think you are? Stab, stab, stab. You go, I'm Jeanne. That's who I think I am. And try and interrupt that, I don't know, strain of thinking. Yes, Carla?
First, let's take the word try out, because when you're trying, you're not, what you want to do is do. And second of all, we need to accept, or maybe I need to accept that we are in this particular moment. And if the question is, I'm in a negative mood, fine. Change it. But don't beat up on yourself because of a negative thought. Don't beat up on yourself because you're not feeling good about yourself at that moment.
Well, that's what I'm trying to say.
Whoa. Let me finish my thought and then you can interrupt as much as you want. If we decide to not accept ourselves as we are, even for a moment, we are losing that moment. We're losing ourselves. The big thing is not only to accept others as they are, but accept ourselves as we are and move forward. And maybe you need to be in that negative moment for half an hour or more. Fine, be there. Because that's the only way we're going to move out of it.
That's actually what I was saying, but in a different way, Carla.
Yeah.
We need to interrupt, because sometimes there are thought patterns that take us down rabbit holes. And we need to process them and let them go, release them, so that we can let other thoughts come in. And I think one of the typical thoughts that people have when they go down the rabbit hole is the I'm not good enough or who do I think I am kind of thoughts. And that's, you have to interrupt that just a minute. You have to process it. You have to let it be for a minute, but you have to process it so it can move on and you can go forward the way that you're talking about.
But it's not a question of trying, it's a question of doing. It's not a question of saying, I need to move forward right this moment, because you may not be able to do it right this moment. It may take 10 minutes. It may take walking away from the whole situation. But dwelling on that situation and obsessing on it, and I do it myself. I'm not saying I'm perfect in it, because I'm not. But when I find that I am moving forward, that's when the process is going. When I find that I am accepting myself as I am in whatever may be going on, that is perfectly good too. It doesn't matter. Making it an intellectual decision is not where it comes from. It comes from the emotions and the feelings with it.
I think
you've been really quiet. Open your mouth.
But I'll listen to it, because I think it is, because I work a lot with creativity and also with quantum reality. What is this new worldview? Then we have to go also into what is this quantum field where creativity really can unfold. And if you look at it from the perspective that everything is, we can call it and define it as good or bad, but it is. Then the moment is more the quality. It's not just a moment in itself as a time paradigm. It is the quality of that moment. And the quality of that moment can be felt badly or not, or positively, but there is a choice here. We choose what we want to think and what we want to feel. And even as Carla says, sometimes, of course, I have my bad times. I feel that I'm not up to the situation. I need rest. I need to take care of myself and my own needs. And it doesn't feel comfortable, but I take time doing it. But at the same time, parallel is, what do I give my attention to? What do I give my attention to? And that is a choice. And in all spiritual tradition, this is all the time. This is really the key. What do you focus on? What do you give attention? What do you nourish in the moment? And then if the quality of the moment is not what you really want, then we come back again to what Victor said, that we create, because in the quantum, what we focus on We create. If it's not there, as it says, that everything is created in the invisibility first. It's invisible. It starts with just to imagine something, to envision it, and then you give it attention until it is implemented. We create the moment. We create the future, the moments of the future as well.
True. And there we all go thinking. I love it.
Well, I'm not sure I'm thinking as I'm just being respectable, because that's what I'm doing. What he is talking about is what I think about all the time, with one exception. I am very present to the fact that my life is being run by my subconscious mind, right? My subconscious mind is really producing all the things that's going on. But the good news is my subconscious mind takes its lead from my conscious mind. And so when I mentioned earlier about the things that we do when we are alone, the things that we do when we are alone really are what is giving our subconscious mind what it is that we care about, what it is that we want to focus on. And after we do that, your subconscious mind doesn't have any better sense than to stay right there, stay focused on this, on the tone of the things that you have given your conscious attention to. So if you're spending your time alone thinking about something that you really don't see any benefit in, or if you're spending your time thinking about something that you are ruminating about, something that's happened in the past, then I want to encourage you to change that. In fact, just recently, I've actually started talking to my subconscious mind, and I've given my subconscious mind a name. So when I'm talking with him just like I'm talking to all of you here. His name is Irv. My middle name is Irving. So I tell my subconscious mind, and since my subconscious mind is running my life, I say, hey, Irv, I think 6 hours is enough time for me to feel like I have a cold. So let's go ahead and end that in 6 hours. Got that? All right, Irv. And when I first started doing it, it took me several times before I told Irv what was up. But now I can just tell him, hey, Irv, I need money. Irv, I want to have a productive day today. And I talk to him just like that. And so the positivity that exudes most of the time is that when I'm alone, I'm talking to Irv, and that's what I'm telling him. Now, if you're married to me, that might be a little different for you, because sometimes your spouses are really not interested in your life, in your approach or your philosophy. They just want you to be their husband, plain and simple. But when that happens, I tell Irv, hey, Irv, today I'm being a better husband than I was yesterday.
I recognize this very well, Victor, because this is also my way of having the dialogue with my inner me, and we can call it the subconscious, but sometimes it's also like the superconscious, and that is also what we why this deep listening is more about intuitive listening, because we know already that the intuitive, from science as well, that our intuition, our subconscious and superconscious has a lot more potential than our conscious thinking. That's why this deeper listening is so important, because then we can have a dialogue with it. I have it myself. I have a dialogue with the different frequencies of myself. And, it's really, really interesting to see.
It is.
Sorry?
In fact, I had a moment of, let's call it a moment of clarity when I was reading, it's a while back, it was the book from Neil Donald Walsh, Conversations with God. Now, the premise of the book was he was really sick and he went off to a cabin to be away from everybody so that he could get better. And he started journaling, and in that journal, he started to see that there was more of a conversation. And the conversation was with his higher being, God. And there were pearls of wisdom that came out in this process that blew my mind. And one of them was, being brought up Catholic, we're brought up with the idea that everything is a sin, and this persona of God said, that's a human judgment. That's not my judgment. And ever since, I've been working on understanding judgment and how we use judgment to kind of govern how we are in the world. You know, you guys, Carla might understand this. You guys probably don't do this, but you see somebody in their 30s, in their 40s, 50s, 60s wearing something that a 20-year-old would wear. Usually women do this, and we're like, oh, she's way too old for that. That's a judgment, and it's none of our business. So why are we judging somebody else? So I started to pay attention to that. And although I haven't named my subconscious or my superconscious like Victor's talking about, I do have those kind of conversations in my head going, why am I worried about that? That's not my business. Just as it's not my business how somebody thinks about me. And that can be freeing. And it can also be something that gets you kind of caught up in philosophical existential thinking that sometimes you can trip yourself. So I bring it back to simply, I want to practice no judgment. And so what I say to myself is the shoulda, coulda, wouldas don't work. And instead of worrying about judging myself harshly like I tend to want to do, I try to be more supportive of myself. And that comes across as being more supportive of others, because I've tried to interrupt that train that I paid so much time on for the ticket, that train of thought. I try to interrupt it and be more positive. And I remember reading in that book when God says to Neil Donald Walsh, that's a human judgment. That's not my judgment. I was like, whoa, that was mind blowing. And I still struggled. I still wrestle with that type of thinking, because that's so built into the core, but when I go, I don't want to judge, or I'm not judging, that's freeing. And that allows me to be more positive no matter what anybody else thinks.
Well, what is interesting there, we talk about judgment as something negative, but that the good judge is neutral, is objective. So when we listen to our subconscious or superconscious, then we already know that, yes, if I am honest, if I listen, if I want to listen in to my highest self, then it always will have the right answer. And that takes some time to understand and to take in, that we can have this dialogue. And when we start the dialogue, and we have the dialogue with our highest self or God, then we always will have the best answer, whatever. And that is totally different from having a judgment from, religious, political, or economical, judgments, codes, social codes, because this is the highest self, and the highest self in us will always the best for everyone. Sometimes the truth then will be unpopular for the other, but because it starts from the objective, from the neutral, which is always also about love, unconditional love, because then you dare to tell the truth. Or sometimes you don't say anything, because that is also the positive action, that sometimes you should, keep your mouth. This is okay. This is something that is it will do no good in this situation.
True.
Well, I must comment that Knut has come alive. we are in his wheelhouse, man. The last few minutes, he has shared some really interesting points, and for me, it completely resonates, and it's really comforting to meet another one, because I'm not so spiritual that I don't realize that I have fleshly desires like everybody else, and I have an ego just like everybody else, and I have to tell you, whenever I meet someone that thinks like I do, it makes it easier for me to keep thinking like I do. So, Knut, thank you so much for what you've shared in the last few minutes, and let's hear some more.
But just to add on to that, Yeah, and just
Go
to
ahead.
add into that, as I said, I think this is the true spirituality, that is to recognize the truth within each other. It has nothing to do with religious codes or dogmas or axioms. It's just this recognition of each other. And when we start there, then we will not judge the other, we will listen and say, okay, what are your needs in this situation or in this relationship? What can we do together? And that is the creation. Instead of reaction, it's creation. Also, to quote Neil Donald, by the way. Yeah.
I have stubbed my toe many times and have made lots of mistakes as I've tried lots of things. And what I find, Knut, is that people who have not dealt with much adversity, they tend to be more rigid in their approach than people who have dealt with adversity. Because when you have dealt with adversity, when you have made faux pas in your life and gotten past them, you tend to be more lenient when you see other people going through their trials, going through their tribulations. And that's not to say that the people who are more strict in their approach are right or they're wrong, but it only tells me who you are by how you respond to the adversities of others. So clearly, Knut, you have made some mistakes in your life. You've done some wrong things. You you, you probably have been married more than one time, like that, and that's just my assessment of people who have made mistakes. Because being married more than one time, I often look at as having been a mistake because I've been married so many times.
Yeah, as Carla said, to accept the moment is that when I accept my faults and errors and trials and tribulations, and I accept it, then I can start to listen. Because otherwise, I always will abandon the so-called negative thoughts or what is uncomfortable in the situation. But when I have learned to listen to myself, learn to accept my own faults and failures and said, okay, yeah, I'm a human being, but still we are in the same boat, because there is nothing that, on the one side and on the other side, there are good people, bad people. We all are both good and bad in that context. And when we do understand that, then we also more easily see the good in each other. We see the opportunity, the potential, and how can we create a better world if we don't see the potential in each other, if we don't see the potential in the other and in co-creation? And especially, as I said again, after this post-COVID, the whole world has been waked up through this pandemic. And if we focus now just on the so-called negative and the physical, this is not just about the physical and health. This is about exactly what you mentioned in the beginning, Victor. This is about how do we look at the world? What kind of worldview do we have? And what do we do after this collapse has come? Because sometimes the positive is that the crisis has to come. Otherwise, it will just continue the same old way.
When you talk about making a better world, we do that by becoming better ourselves. And
yeah.
I allude to my mantra, better than I was and not as good as I'm going to be. There's a story that Earl Nightingale tells about a man who was working at home and his son was trying to play with him, and he wanted to focus his attention on what he was doing. So he took a newspaper and tore it up into pieces and gave it to his son and told his son to put the world together, because it was on one side of the sheet was a picture of a globe. And in no time at all, the boy had completed the puzzle. And so his father wants to know, well, how did you do that? How did you know which countries go where? How did you do it? And the little boy turned it over and said, well, there's a picture of a man on the other side. So all I did was I put the pieces together to form the man, and the world came together. Now that's just so deep for me. That's just so deep for me. So even though the world in general are lamenting the ups and the downs and the things that they're dealing with, my world is not that way. I'm having a great life every day. The part of the world that I have anything to do with, I'm leveraging my mind power, my subconscious mind, and my ability to see what I want to see. I'm leveraging that thing so that if you run into me you're going to hear some good stuff. You're going to hear some things that you're excited about. You're going to be reminded about some things that you could be excited about. And that is how I make the world a better place.
And it's very that's very powerful, because I often remind folks that we have the ripple effect that we need to use more often. When I say something positive, somebody else hears it, and then they say something positive, and that ripples out, and it goes on further and further and further. We may think we're just one tiny little bit in this world of 7 billion people, but we're powerful, each and every one of us, because we can change how we are in the world, and that changes how others are. I mean, there's only one thing, and I remind folks when I'm talking to them, there's only one thing I have control over, and that's how I act and react in the world. And that level of control, when it's used powerfully, can help affect change in others, because they get to act or react, and they get to choose at time. It was Stephen Covey who said, between the stimulus and the response, you get to choose. Well, I like to add to that, you get to choose heaven or hell. Heaven being peace and calm, hell being chaos. So you get to choose. You break a vase. Are you angry because you broke a vase? Or do you say, oh, drat, I broke a vase, let me clean it up and move on? So how we show up in the world, like Victor, what you're talking about, you get to change the people that come into your life just by being you. That's very powerful. And then they take that out, and so on and so on. It's the old, I think it was a Brett commercial. I told 2 friends and they told 2 friends, and so on and so on. And you see the pictures of this person exponentially grow. So sometimes we need a reminder that all we have to do is be positive with ourselves, and that spreads positivity beyond us, that beyond a measure we don't even know.
And that means also, to accept and to say the chaos. If we can't accept the chaos, we will never come up with new solutions, because new solutions are always outside the comfort zone, what we already know. If we really want to change, we need new insight, new information. And that is always in what we call the chaos. But in the chaos theory, we know that what is experienced as local chaos is cosmic order. So we need to have a worldview, or look at it from a higher perspective. When we look at local chaos, we say, wow, there is a pattern here. There is something emerging, and we haven't really experienced it, seen it, we don't really understand it yet, but something is emerging. That is what I feel now, in this time. In the chaos that we call the pandemic, and so say, okay, wow, what a chance, what an opportunity humanity has been given now in order to create a new order out of this chaos, because it's needed, required.
It's true. Yeah, I like to talk about how you act or react to chaos, because you can be, oh, the world is ending, Chicken Little kind of, the sky is falling, or you can look up and say, oh, an acorn fell off the oak, which is natural. So how you interpret the chaos and how you respond to it is what's different. Again, I'll go back to, I was in a seminar, I don't know, it was a decade ago or so, but we were going into a financial meltdown, as we typically do every 3 or 4 years. And everybody in there was going, what am I going to do? I want to start a business, but the world is falling apart. The stock market's going crazy. And I remember saying, I'm going to step out and do one thing, and if it works, great, I've got a new business. And I remember somebody saying, how can you say that when everybody's talking about, the world falling in chaos? And I was like, yeah, the stock market can crash, but it doesn't affect me immediately, because I'm not playing in the stock market. So I can look at the world and at this chaos a little bit differently. And I think if I look at it more constructively, how do I move out forward, then I'm going to be better. And that then got us all talking about how to act to this chaos versus react.
But when you're thinking of what am I going to do in the future, be aware that whatever you want to do, you don't know until you get there. You have that journey you're walking. And until you get to that point, you really don't know where you're going.
That's true. That's very true. And enjoying the journey is important.
Right. Putting the journey in front of the result is more important than the journey, than getting to the result.
It kind of makes me think about the old family structures. When I was sitting down with my grandmother, she would talk like this, kind of heady and philosophical, and she would say things like, God doesn't give you a cross he knows you cannot bear, trying to get me to think, as you said, Knut, a little bit higher level. At the time, I wasn't taking it that way, but she was always looking at it from her life experience, which was, decades beyond mine. She was much more wise. And as Victor points out, having those mistakes and learning from them gives us wisdom. So I'm having this discussion with you guys thinking, this is what I would have expected my elders to talk about, to talk to me like when I was younger. I kind of I didn't grow up with my big extended family because we were off somewhere else. My dad was in the military. And I hear stories that they did have discussions like this from my cousins. So thank you for the philosophy. I needed to hear it.
But it isn't the philosophy as much as how you live it. We get stuck thinking about philosophy, this, but that's not who you are. And who you are is more important than what we think. It goes beyond what we think.
Well, let me define philosophy as it is a system of thought, and we all have our own systems of thought. And that helps instruct and define who we are, because how we think, how we act, how we react are all part of the whole of who we are. But it goes back to understanding the journey.
Do we need to understand the journey, or do we need to live the journey? We're always in our head. Do we need to understand it? I'm just wondering. And I'd like the answer from everyone, and then we need to close the show because we're already a little over time.
I just wanted to close that, and because now we talk about changing mindsets. If we are in a crisis, then we need to change our mindset. So it is a dual, or it's a dialogue between the thinking and the doing. And if we need to change something, we need both the understanding and the change doing. And I think that is the quality or the criteria of the entrepreneurship we need now. That is the visionary. The visionary always look into the chaos and say, wow, what is going on here? And you don't focus on or drown in the chaos. You say, wow, this is an opportunity to come up with what is now emerging. It's in a new market, it's a new relationship, it's a new work, it's new jobs, it's created out of this new mindset, this new worldview, and then we act on that. That is important. If you don't act on it, it's just a philosophy left.
Talking about that, you have changed your status recently. Are you engaged or what's going on? Knut.
I have changed what?
Your status to a relationship.
No, maybe I'm half in love, but I'm not in a relationship. But okay, when you mention it, I am looking for it. So
Okay, I remember seeing that recently. Victor, you have 1 minute, and I will hold up the phone.
Well, speaking of relationships, the trouble I think with relationship is that when we experience that euphoria, when we meet that right person, we mistakenly think that it's that person that's generating the euphoria, but it's really not. It's the way that we look at the world that's generating the euphoria. So eventually, when that euphoria starts to dissipate, we then again think that it's that person and they're changing that's making the euphoria go away. It's never the person. Everything that we experience in our life is coming from us and is pushing out. And to give me a minute to articulate this, it's just plain criminal.
Well, I'm sorry, but there are people who may be saying, hey, the show is supposed to be over by now. So you're right. You could go on for hours on that, Victor. I could go on hours about things too, but sometimes we need to close the show.
Well, I'd like to just add that you asked if we need to be thinking about it or doing it. And I think that, no, I'm not going to think it. I believe that we've spent almost a whole century letting the thinking be the most important part of the journey versus the being. And I like to remind myself that we are human beings, not human doings. So what I think the answer to your question, Carla, is we need to understand the journey, but we need to do the journey, and we need to change the balance from thinking being more important than doing to doing being more important than thinking, to a point where they finally get to a balance. Because we are human beings, and sometimes we just need to be.
Okay, I accept that. And I agree with that. And if we are being, it's very hard to be thinking. We are just being who we are. So when we judge ourselves as negative, we're putting ourselves in that position. When we look to be happy, we are putting ourselves in that position of being happy. It appears from everything I read, the more happy we are, the more joyful the world around us becomes. And it's not up to Jeanne to make me happy, or Victor, or Knut, or anyone. That happiness comes from within and bursts out around those around us. And with that, we have come to the end of another MindPlore show. And we will be back on Thursday with another conversation on bringing positivity into 2022. And please like our channel. Not only like our channel, share it out with your friends and family. And let's get more people coming to MindPlore with Carla and Friends. Jeanne, what am I forgetting?
Please join us on the YouTube channel, comment and share. That helps us with the YouTube algorithm to reach more people. And be aware that Carla has started a Patreon page. It's the Giggle Lady, and she's looking for sponsorships to help keep her shows going, both the Learning English by Speaking English show and MindPlore. There is a raffle going on right now. Anybody who donates $5 or more, their name goes into a hat, and the prize is a half-hour conversation with Carla online, one of her storied interviews, if you will. And we look forward to people supporting us to keep the show alive.
Thank you, Jeannie. And with that, we are going to wave goodbye, and we will be back on Thursday. Everyone wave goodbye, and I will go off air. Keep on waving, guys.